January 2014 meeting of the Agency Operations Committee. I'd like to remind everybody that this meeting is being broadcast via the internet, so prepare accordingly. Happy New Year, by the way. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the October 23rd, 2013 Agency Operations Committee meeting. The minutes were sent to all members for review on January 8th, 2014. Any questions or corrections to the minutes? If not, may I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second? I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Motion carries. For the next agenda item, we have two updates that will be presented today. Both of these updates are information only and do not require any committee action. Agenda item 3A is a standing report that we receive each quarter, which is an update of agency finances. This report was sent to all board members 2 weeks ago. Dr. Alonzo will present this report. He and his staff are available to respond to comments. Dr. Alonzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item is a standing financial report, and as you said, we present this every quarter to the committee. We have a hard copy here for you in case you do not have yours, but it was sent to you 2 weeks ago. The report that you have before you is for the period ending December 31st, 2013, and represents 4 months of activity in the current fiscal year, FY14. This is a report that most of you, all of you, are familiar with. I do not intend to go into too much detail on any aspect of it. I certainly will be glad to, but I just want to say that this report is a report that we find very useful here at the agency in tracking our expenditures. It's a report that I use as your CFO to look at expenditures, expenditure trends, the budget, and so forth. And I rely on it monthly for our briefings and for our managerial decisions and my recommendations to the commissioner. It comes straight from our accounting records, and it gives a very accurate and transparent status of our financials here at the agency. One item that I do wish to point out that this report, that's in this report, it will not be obvious to you, but this includes funds that were appropriated under House Bill 1025, which is called the Supplemental Appropriation Bill for FY13. You may recall that higher education received approximately $81.4 million of supplemental appropriations towards the end of the session, and funding for 3 of those appropriations had what they call UB authority. In other words, the authority to carry over funds from last year to this fiscal year. And because these funds were included or allocated so late in the year, some of those funds had to be UB'd into the current. So they're reflected in here, and the expenditures against those appropriations will be included in this report as the institutions spend that money. Since this is the first report for fiscal year 14, I'd like to remind you that we provide a detailed list of all budget adjustments. We started this several years ago in the spirit of full transparency. They're all listed cumulatively. You can see that on the list starting on page 2 of your report. Other than that, I will be glad to respond to any specific questions that any of you may have, or have staff address any specific, provide any specific information that you may need.
Any questions for Dr. Alonzo?
Well, just because I'm not an accounting expert, on page 9, is this an accounting adjustment, the negative cash balance?
Page 9. Good question. And one that I have an answer for.
Okay. I knew you would.
This is the status of our federal contracts. This is actually what we call a cash report. And since we are on what they call a reimbursement basis on all our contracts with the federal government, you will see, in fact, you want to see all our balances as being negative. Because, and the federal government lets you choose either the advance advancement or the reimbursement, repayment. However, when you choose advancements, you have to keep only a three-day minimum balance. You have to pay, track the interest that it earns, return it to the feds, and so forth and so on. So we are on a reimbursement basis.
Okay.
What this means then is that we have spent that money. We have not drawn it down as of the end of this report, or as of the date of this report, have not drawn it down from the feds. So that's one of the things I always look for. If we have a positive, then I ask questions, because we shouldn't have a positive. Okay, we should have a negative. That's what that is.
So, Arturo, is that 193,000, and that's a receivable?
Yes, and right.
Okay.
And at the end of the year, that, or as that money comes in, that will, of course, turn to zero.
Yes, sir.
Chairman. Arturo, also under Workforce Academic Affairs.
What page are we?
Page 2. The decrease of 599, adjusting the program for Apply Texas. What, do you know offhand what that was? And I guess we, as well, the closing the gaps for Excellence 67.5. The 599, 334.
I don't have the specifics on that, Harold, but I will look into that and get you exactly what that entry represents. It is an accounting entry to probably shift funds from one program to the other.
Okay, but we don't know that where the 599 was shifted to, or is there another? Or it may have been multiple things.
Yeah, well, it says on there that it's a adjustment to program code, but I don't know what that program code represents. I'll have to get the details for you.
Okay.
We have, and you know, Ken Martin.
I actually went back and talked to Ken, and he said, "Can you ask a question so I can talk?" No, so.
I gave him this one specifically.
I like
so
Janelle's
answer.
question better because I knew the answer to that one.
Good afternoon. Ken Martin, Director of Financial Planning and Reporting. This particular item, when we set up budget so that we can track the particular spending, we set up what we call a program code. And what we did here is it's just a movement, a transfer. You can see the 599 and then a positive subsequently to it of 600. There was a budget increase as well. So when we moved the budget, we also had the budget increase. It just moved within the code,
Okay.
but it stayed within the program.
Just an accounting entry more
Just
than
an
anything.
accounting. It helps operationally, so how they can track these, so the divisions can see expenditures. Sometimes we'll have multiple program codes within a program, so they can see different breakouts of how they're spending their money.
Excellent. Thanks.
May I mention also that, and I think I've mentioned this before, that all adjustments that we make are routed through the proper assistant commissioner, deputy commissioner, and eventually to the commissioner. So there's full transparency. We don't do anything without fully documenting that. So we just think it's a good practice to make sure that we have, and that it's a good practice to let you see all adjustments.
Any other questions? Okay, agenda item 3B is an update on the solicitation process for the procurement of a loan management system. Dan Weaver, Assistant Commissioner, will provide a general high-level overview of the solicitation process. Because the evaluation team is still in the process of evaluating proposals, Mr. Weaver will not be able to disclose potential vendors, prices, or other proprietary information in order to maintain the integrity of the procurement process. Once the evaluation process has been completed, staff will make a recommendation to the Commissioner, followed by an action item required by the Chair, Vice Chair, and Chair for this committee for awarding one or more contracts to the successful respondents. Mr. Weaver?
Chairman Hahn, you'll be happy to know that I can't really say a whole lot because we're in the middle of the process, which is probably good for y'all, so it'll keep me short. Lucky you, although I will happy to answer any questions or avoid any questions later if you want to continue asking. July of 2012, I think Chairman Hahn expressed some particular displeasure about the cost of our loan management system, our ongoing license. And at that particular time, I think we made a commitment that we were in the process of looking at alternatives, that we were going to come back out and do a solicitation to look for alternatives. We started the process of putting the pieces together for the solicitation in May of 2013, so last year. And then ultimately we came to the board in July last year to seek authority to go out on a solicitation. And you actually approved two different agenda items, one of them looking for a loan management system that was fully encompassing of all of our operations. And then we also had a separate issue with regard to a litigation package to help us pursue our defaulted loans in collaboration with the OAG. We issued the solicitation after a fairly extensive and exhaustive requirements generation process. It took us about 4 months to get through all of the requirements. It was a cross-disciplinary group that put the requirements together between the ISS department, the business office, loan program, the OAG's office, and I think that's in the business office. We issued the solicitation in October. We got 10 responses back from the solicitation. We had 8 that were deemed to be responsive to the RFO from our purchasing department. And then we established a review team of 9 individuals to review the proposals. And the 9 individuals very much reflects, again, the different groups within the loan program that have a vested interest in the ongoing operations and the functionality of any kind of a system or solution that we might end up selecting. We've been through the review process. We've identified 4 potential respondents that are going to be coming in for technical interviews the week after next. So all 4 of those will be in doing product demonstrations, not just for the evaluation team, but for other individuals within the agency that also have an interest in making sure that whatever recommendation that we ultimately make is going to be sufficient for our needs and also be long range and maintaining whatever kind of function within the loan program that we need. Ultimately, we'll make a recommendation to the commissioner. The commissioner will then take that evaluation and ultimately put it to the chair, the vice chair, and the chairman of the AOC committee for approval or authorization for whichever path we decide to recommend at that particular point. That's a really, really short and concise. I'll answer as many questions as I can. We wanted to let you know that we're kind of in the middle of this right now. There are a lot of folks working on this within the agency. We have a lot of really talented people that are working on this, which is good. I would say our review process has been robust. We're not going to let anything slip through the cracks, and our recommendation to the commissioner will be comprehensive and forward-looking. And I will stop there and answer any questions you might have.
Questions?
And Dan, the system that we have now, how long have we been using the current system?
We converted in 2007.
Okay, so
We have
probably in that time frame, technology has jumped light years ahead of
It's
what
gone
was
backwards.
available.
No, I'm just kidding. Actually, technology, unfortunately, in the private student loan marketplace, which is shrinking, hasn't progressed terribly quickly in that time period. We have some respondents that have offered some new platforms, and that's part of our evaluation process. Many of them are not terribly mature. There's not a lot of volume on those particular platforms, so there's a little bit of a risk factor that we have to take into consideration. The real end game of all of this is kind of divorcing the loan management that's tied to the past and really converting it into a loan system of the future. And we're kind of at the beginning stages of that, because student loans are a lot different than mortgages or regular credit card loans. There's forbearances and interest deferments and payment deferments and a variety of flexibility that are built into those systems that don't really exist in if I was going to run it on QuickBooks, for instance. We are trying to push the envelope a little bit with some of the respondents to see how far back into the food chain we can take them. This may not be the last solicitation that we enter into in the coming years. Really kind of depends on the final evaluations, the financial evaluations that we're going to take, and then again we'll make a recommendation to the commissioner at that point. I'm not saying I'm disappointed in the responses. I think we've had some that have been very high quality. We looked at solutions, so we also have not just software solutions, but we have outsourcing solutions as well. So I think we have a good options to choose from, but from a technology standpoint, not as far along as you might have expected.
Well, this is a significant move for the coordinating board to make that, and it's a tremendous amount of work and effort once you do select them to convert to that new system. Because whatever it is, it's going to be no doubt significantly different than what you have now.
Potentially.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions?
I just wanted to add, and Harold, you kind of alluded to that, is when I tasked the staff with coming up with the requirements and the subsequent evaluation, one of my directives was that let's not get in a rush for this. I mean, there is no need to make a decision that we may regret, either price-wise or technology-wise or any kind-wise. So, this is why we are taking our time and we are looking at everything, and because there's no due date for us to implement or to convert or to do whatever we're going to do. So I really think that we...
And I'd like to echo that from the standpoint of, if we haven't made these big changes from a technological standpoint, and if what we've got is working to the level that it is, if we don't find an answer that you're excited about, then, there's no gun to our head that says we've got to make any move. Is there, or?
Well, I think part of the issue, though, isn't the contract for the existing system.
We have the contract was negotiated, and it's 10 one-year contracts.
Right. So
we're in the 7th year of that process, so we have three more one-year increments that we could exercise.
And that's all I'm asking is that is there that's what I'm saying, that it gives us latitude and some flexibility, and I would just urge that, these are huge decisions in my mind because it involves so many people and so many things that let's make sure that what we find is what you feel really good about.
Sure.
And that it's a good fit, because if it's not, all right, well, let's sit back a minute and continue to wait and see if something new comes onto the market in the next year or two and go from there. So I just, to your point, Arturo, we have the ability to be very judicious.
And we will be.
Well, I just wanted to say, Bobby, that we will certainly follow the will of the board, and we will do that. We will be judicious and make sure that if we make a recommendation to the board about purchasing a new system, we will make a compelling case that it's the right thing to do. And we won't if we can't make the case. Just for the record, Dan, what's the average lifetime of the software and the other peripherals that we have that are in place right now? We've had this system for 7 years. Is that about average?
We've had this for 7 years, but it was developed in the state of New York in the late 60s, I believe. Yeah. It's COBOL running off of the mainframe, and there are resource constraints as far as technical support for COBOL programming, and Sid can come up here and answer this question probably better than I can. It's old. It's new for us because we've just been using it for a few years, but the guts of it is ancient.
But are you saying the technology for this kind of software hasn't improved that much since the 60s, if it's still an old system and program?
The federal, systems were developed and designed to make federal loans, as was the coordinating board system that operated on our mainframe. So they were all developed in the late 60s. The progression, there are some new platforms out there. Again, everything's been developed to run federal loans. Alternative loans has been a peripheral side of the business. It grew very substantially a few years ago, and then it's been shrinking very quickly since then. A lot of the major banks have exited the business. I think J.P. Morgan Chase announced that they were getting out. There are really only 3 other nationally viable private alternative lenders: Discover, Wells Fargo, and Sallie Mae. They don't share their platforms necessarily. So it's a kind of a unique it's a unique situation, I think, in that, and I think it's akin to the automotive parts. If you go buy a air filter from the auto shop, their technology looks the same as, it's dot matrix printers, and it's just archaic. They've had no incentive. They have incentive to keep doing that. So the suppliers, I think, are responsive to that need to keep things the same. They don't want to make any changes. So I think a lot of that had to do in the student loan marketplace as well. Again, I don't want to cast a huge negative on the availability of alternative products. There are some that are out there. We just are going to be cautious to venture off into something different. Did I answer your question, Commissioner?
Yes, thank you.
You mentioned 2 modules, one for the actual loan servicing and then the collections process that I guess interfaces with the Attorney General. If, as part of this process, are we looking at the possibility of outsourcing the loan collections? Has that been something that we are...
When you say collections, do you mean defaulted loans or
no,
collecting on
the loan system itself?
It's in just the standard repayment.
Yes.
That was crafted into the requirements as an option. So
okay.
we have folks that have responded in that manner.
Okay. But you said there's 3 viable. I'm trying to tie the Discover, Wells Fargo, and Sallie Mae. Is there any way that a private company could be a sub-servicer and an outsourcing basis that might be more cost effective?
That's the cost analysis that we're going to be doing.
Okay.
It is going to be part of, the requirements were built to put a very wide net on what's out there. So I think our respondents were reflective of the nature of the RFO that we wrote. And we wrote it in such a manner that we would have folks that could bid on it in that manner and that we could evaluate those. That's more of a financial decision as opposed to it's financial and strategic for the coordinating board also. Because once you make that step off into an outsource environment, I would suspect it'd be very difficult to go back. It would be very difficult for us to be responsive to legislative requests for a new loan or other kind of a service that we might be able to offer as part of the normal legislative process. Not to say that it's insurmountable, but there are states that have the same model that we have, and there are states that have an outsourcing model. So that's not uncommon.
Okay.
And we're looking at both.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you very much.
You bet.
Agenda item 4A is consideration of authorization to issue competitive solicitation for compensation and classification analysis. Carrie Whitfield, Director of Human Resources, will present this to the committee. Carrie? Afternoon.
Microphone, please.
Yeah. Is the red light on?
There it is.
Okay. We can hear you.
I can hear me too. Wow. Good afternoon again. I'm very pleased to be here to ask you to approve a request to go out for a RFP on a compensation classification program that I think will significantly help us enhance our compensation classification structure and system to help us maintain equity within pay practices and consistency across the agency for all of our pay practices, and also to have data to respond to retention and turnover issues that we sometimes seem to be experiencing at this time. And we want to make sure that we have classifications that are meaningful based on their duties, responsibilities, required experience in their field, and all of the education factors that go into determining salary-based positions. So that is what we're looking to find in the RFP. We hope to, my goal is to do an RFP with all the parts and pieces that you could think of for a comprehensive compensation classification program that will work across all lines, across the board, in the entire agency, that will work for everyone to create a collaborative process in compensation classification. I want to see what all of it looks like, from looking at job descriptions, titles, market data, so that we can really put together something that's going to work very nicely for the agency and be sustainable for many, many years. Any questions?
Questions from the board? Just trying to understand, so do other agencies have this tool, or does the state not provide some kind of guidelines for that? How does that work, or comparison with other states and agencies similar to ours?
That's a great question. The coordinating board is exempt from the state compensation plan, so that leaves us virtually on our own to create and maintain and manage our own compensation classification program. It appears, I've been here going on 4 years, and it appears that it's been quite some time since this has been overhauled, and it's time that we look into this. And with new technology, I think it's going to look very different than what have experienced in the past. But directly to answer your question, we don't have a plan like the state does. But and the reason we don't is because we try to do a lot of mirroring with higher education, in that we do recruit and want to hire out of higher education so that it enhances us to meet the mission for the agency. So does that help?
Yeah, that helps.
Okay.
So my question is, I'm supportive of this. I think this is important just for sometimes employee morale and things like that. But did you build this into your budget? It's already planned for it?
Well, that's Arturo's. That's a question for Arturo.
Well, the answer to that, it depends on what comes in.
I understand.
Good answer.
I asked that question as well.
Yes. So this is about the third time I answered this. We don't know what's out there. We don't know what levels of sophistication we're going to be able to. If we get a reasonable price, we've got some of this built into the budget. If not, we'll have to see. So yeah, again, as a reminder, this is authority to go out on the solicitation. If we find something that, one, we can afford, that looks good, we will go through the proper channels to get the contract approved. at a later date.
Do you have an estimation of like what you think it would cost something?
Well, again, and I don't want to be, evasive, but it depends on on what level we look at.
Right, that was my question. What's your scope? Are you going to just do Austin and Travis County? Or are you going to look at, Central Texas and?
The plan is to look at nationwide for positions that we recruit nationwide, as well as local. So in all the parts that go into the RFP, we may have to select in order to get a price that's reasonable for us to be physically responsible for. So we may not be able to get a full-blown process that I would like. But we want to see what that looks like, and we're hoping we get enough response from bids that we can find something that we can take the whole package, or at least pick and choose what's going to work best for the agency as a whole.
One of the reasons that I brought this to the committee is that, according to board rules, anything over $100,000 has to come to the committee. We don't think it's going to exceed that, but I didn't want to issue a solicitation, which we are authorized to without action from the committee, find out that it would require, and then come back to the committee. So kind of playing it safe.
So what you just said, if y'all get a proposal that's under 100, then y'all are going to go ahead and move forward, is what you were expecting. It wouldn't need to be brought back
That's
here.
right. According to the board rules, anything under 100,000 is authority is delegated to the commissioner. We will, because this is of interest to the board, we'll keep you posted.
It is of interest, but I mean, I guess from the
we will, although we're not obligated to bring it to the board, we will certainly review it for its cost efficiency and cost effectiveness, and to make sure that we get what we're asking for at a reasonable market fair cost. So,
and I guess what'll help with that is if we are able to get several competitive bids,
right,
it'll give more confidence that no, we were able to choose something that is competitive. And like Janelle, I mean, I'm supportive of the thought process. When Arturo, you say a reasonable bid, my problem is I have no earthly clue what a reasonable bid for this is, even though I know
we do nurses all the time.
I know that it takes a lot of information gathering, and it is a very detailed and thorough process to get something that we can really use. And I guess my hope would be that we'd be able to use it for quite a while.
Yeah, exactly.
As a roadmap for that.
It might not be as complicated as it might appear, because SHEO, the State Higher Education Executive Officers Organization, collects data on what different state agencies like ours pay their employees. So we may be able to get those data. There's some other things that might reduce costs. So it's not going to be it might not be as sweeping as you might think. So we don't have a lot of money, frankly. So we're not going to spend $300,000.
Whatever the program is, it's going to have to be pliable. It's a moving target, as things change in the marketplace, right?
Right.
That's for sure. I have a motion, second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you. Agenda item 4B is consideration of authorization to use competitive solicitation for acquisition of a new video conferencing system for the agency and increasing the capacity of the agency's data telecommunications facilities in an estimated amount of $235,000. Dr. Alonzo and Sid Hodgson, Assistant Commissioner for Information and Solution Services, will present this item to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have briefed the committee and the board before, after legislation was passed in the last session that allows for board members, or for the board to conduct board meetings with members being remotely connected. However, there are some stringent requirements for the technology, very, very detailed, that says this is what they got to see, this is what the audience has to see, and so forth and so on. We, in anticipation of having the need for remote, for people to attend the meeting, for board members to participate remotely, we will probably need an upgrade to our system. We do not have that capacity. So we want to go out on bid and see what is available. That's it.
Well, Arturo's done my speech for me. So, some of you may recall that in our LAR submission for the last legislature, we had included an exception item request, which had several IT-related infrastructure items. One of the items on that list was, in fact, enhancements to our video conferencing capabilities. That exception item, unfortunately, did not get through the legislature. However, as Dr. Alonso indicates, they did pass legislation which allows participation in meetings such as this by remote participants. In the past, we've struggled whenever we had to bring somebody in from a remote location, depending on the technology they had at their end. In one case, we used Skype, for example, to bring Dr. Agrawal on board from India. That type of capability has its limitations. It's great for one-to-one communication. It's great for talking to your kids in another city, but it does not really meet the broadcast high-definition capabilities that the legislation dictates. Might mention, though, that aside from the legislation itself, excuse me, we've had several discussions with our executive officers over the last several months on this subject, and I think there's a general consensus that it simply makes good business sense to enhance our capabilities. There's increasing use of webcasting, video conferencing for outreach to community, committee meetings, for training classes, some involving hundreds of people remotely, and we really need to enhance that capability. What we're looking at is a capability whereby we could conduct video conferences not only in this room, but in other rooms around the agency, and conceivably if the commissioner wished to do a video conference from his office, that could be accommodated as well. Over the past 6 months or so, we've had our staff looking at various alternatives out there. We received informal proposals from around 5 companies. Those range from around $100,000 at the low end to $400,000 at the high end. But what we need to do now with the approval of this committee is issue a more formal solicitation, fine-tune the requirements, make them more specific so they know what we're looking for, and hopefully the vendors will sharpen their pencils a little bit and come back with something we can afford. I guess other than that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. May I say before the questions asked, any questions about how this is going to be paid for, I'll punt to Dr. Alonso.
Bobby. And I think you helped clear this up for me, because I was, when we first were looking at this, I'm trying to understand this whole bunch of money for our board meetings. I mean, and my urging would be, please make sure that whatever we're doing, that we can use this in a whole bunch of other different capacities, so that I feel like we're really getting the value for it. Because I understand it's nice to have, but if a member can't attend a board meeting, we're spending all this just for that, I'm not feeling great about it. But if we're able to show that we're able to do this, and this, and really demonstrate that we'll be able to use it on a regular basis, and really enhance lots of other things besides just the board meeting, then I feel so much better about it.
Exactly. I agree wholeheartedly.
So can Harold, Skype in from his dear lease?
Well, we're not going to use Skype. That's the thing.
But it'll be high definition.
We want to provide something better.
Harold will have to have some bandwidth.
Well, that's another thing that would be part of this. It's mentioned, I believe, in some of the literature you've been provided with. Part of it would be enhancing our telecommunications capacity, because we don't want to have video conferencing whereby we have to knock everybody else in the agency off the internet to make it work. So we really have to enhance our communications capacity as well. There's increasing use of software in a cloud, for example. Our email now is in a cloud, so there's a lot of contention for the communications facilities. So that's something else we have to address as part of this.
Either Arturo or David, can you tell us how many video teleconferences we do, and on an annual basis? We do a lot.
Commissioner, I can part of the answer. In fiscal year 12, we did 36 webcasts. Fiscal year 13, we did 61. And the current year, we're looking at somewhere between 75 to 80, if the current pace
Numbers
continues.
been going up steadily.
Dramatically.
And we get requests all the time whenever we say we need to have an advisory committee or a a teleconference or a meeting on some topic, first question that usually comes from the institution says, "Can we participate on the
Web conference.
on the web conference because of travel limitations?" They've got.
Well, and the side benefit of this is all those travel expenses. So really, you may pay for this in a couple of years if you look at how much we spend on travel. And when you think of volunteers, so for anyone to come down here for a 2-hour meeting is still one full day off of work somewhere else. And so as you try to coerce volunteers, to serve, I just think this is a great way to, help them not have to always be off their own work site for a day and a half or a hotel room and all of that. So.
Harold?
Well, and I agree with both of you wholeheartedly. Do we have this number of 235? Is that kind of the informal kind of where you think it might come in?
Based on the 5 informal proposals we received is kind of what we think would be a reasonable amount to provide what we need.
Okay, and so from the remote location, they would just be told what sort of equipment they need to have if they want to participate on that basis?
Exactly, and with some of the solutions vary, of course, but one of the solutions we look at, what you would do is simply download an app from the App Store and have that installed on your PC. Free app, not something you'd have to pay for.
Excellent.
You said your budget is...
He didn't say. Glad you asked.
We will be looking for the resources.
I move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Sir.
Thank you.
Agenda item 4C is consideration of authorization to issue competitive solicitation for professional services contract for the redesign of the agency's main website in an estimated amount of $150,000. Dr. Alonzo.
Actually, I think Sid will present this.
Well, I'm here. This, too, was something we included in our exception request for the last legislature, and again, it was denied or overlooked, whatever. And even before the Sunset made this recommendation, certainly there was a recognition internally that there was problems with navigating around our website. The commissioner, in fact, mentioned it to me the first time I met him. So it's something that's been in the background as an issue that we needed to address. Sunset kind of has given us some impetus to really do something about it. So what we'd like to do is get a professional web design firm in here to really look at how our websites are structured and rearrange them and make them more user-friendly and easier to navigate around based on the audience that happens to be looking at it. So it would be specific to students or institutions or whatever. So again, here, I don't know where the money's going to come from. However, we'd like to issue a solicitation and just see what comes back, and then we'll see where we go from there, depending on what the prices look like.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Agenda item 5A, update on internal audit reports and activities. This item is a reporting item only, does not require any committee action. Mark Pale will present this item. Mark?
Thank you, and good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members. Agenda item 5A, as he stated, is an informational item to bring you up to date on internal audit reports and activities since our last update that was provided in October. During the reporting period, we issued 3 internal audit reports, and those are included in your meeting materials. One report was on Sunset recommendation implementation status, and 2 reports were on the college work study program, and those were projects that were conducted at Texas A&M University and the University of Texas. And all 3 reports had no reportable conditions or recommendations. The the one report that I would like to say a few words about, the Sunset Review Commission recommendations. That's really an informational type report, and recognizing the high-profile status of the Sunset recommendations, and with the knowledge that the State Auditor's Office and/or the Sunset Commission is going to be making a return visit to take a look at how this agency has implemented the recommendations. It was really with that, it was really with that in mind that we wanted to provide some status information. Excuse me.
We'll get you some water.
Yeah.
Here, there's some right there.
It's right there.
I'll do the same.
I think I'll have some.
Yes, I will too. I'll drink with you. That's a good opportunity.
Cedar fever.
We can relate.
So the report, if there's one thing I would point out about it, is that I think that it shows that it's a point in time sort of snapshot assessment of the status of our implementation. And just since the report was issued in October, you can already see movement. We did sort of just an informal look a couple weeks ago just to see what has changed, and I could point out to you, like on page 2 of the report, the pie charts that are located there. For the first pie chart, which is really where we put a lot of our emphasis in taking a look at the implementation status, in particular of the original Sunset recommendations. Those are now 17 implemented, 6 in progress, and then 1 not implemented but risk otherwise mitigated. So for both the original recommendations and the provisions that were added in Senate Bill 215, we can see continued movement, and I would suggest, and we will probably propose an additional update to this report that we will pick up in our next audit plan for FY15 that'll be presented for your approval at the July meeting, and that would again give us an opportunity to focus on any items that are remaining as not implemented or in progress, and make sure that everybody's on the same page. The other information on the update, we completed and closed 2 investigations during the reporting period. Both of those came to us through the State Auditor's Office. One of those involved the alleged improper receipt of student aid by a recipient, and we were unable to substantiate that complaint. The other complaint was really more of a question, and it was posed about the legitimacy of an alleged university website, and this alleged university was an entity that was referred to as Baytown University. And this is an example. Oftentimes in these matters, we will work with whatever program area that we have within the agency, work with the subject matter experts. So in this case, we worked with our war division as well as our general counsel's office, and there was some research done into the website, and certainly established that it was not a legitimate university. It was not legitimate in making the claim that they could offer degrees in the capacity that they were stating. And so ultimately the report went back to the complainant and the State Auditor's Office, just answering that particular complainant's questions about the website. And I believe on one like this, it would have been something that we could have passed to the Attorney General's office had we been able to establish a physical location for the entity. But as is often the case with these types of situations, you can't establish, you can't determine. It's just an internet storefront, basically, and if it's created in some other country, it's very difficult. They pop up and they disappear, and that seems to be what the case was on this particular matter.
So how prevalent is that?
War could probably answer that question better than me. This is the first
Help
one
me
that's
here.
come to me.
What's WAR?
That's the Workforce Academic Affairs Division.
Okay.
Right. This is the first one that's come to me,
Uh-huh.
but as I worked with them, my understanding is that they get questions about other, I believe they maintain a list of universities that do not meet accreditation standards, so that our consumers are at least kept aware of those that make the list.
But those are at least ones that exist. You kind of made it sound like some of these are fictitious, and to where you say I would have still thought that would be something that would be turned over to the Attorney General to investigate, because there's something there, but
right. And I'll ask our counselor. He actually, Bill, I believe, he talked about the difficulties in the AG actually pursuing something if we can't designate the location.
You asked how prevalent they were, and frankly, they're far more prevalent than any of us would like to believe. And what we have found, and we have worked with the Attorney General before on several of these, including real facilities where we could have jurisdiction. What we found was they were closing before we could take action against them. This is the Attorney General with us, and in a couple of instances, TEA as well, because some of these fraudulent entities were purporting to issue high school diplomas, and others were purporting to offer college degrees. And they'd close and reopen all in the span of a day. But they wouldn't reopen in the same location. They might move their operation from Texas to Louisiana. And what we have been told is even more prevalent is overseas. So it is a very challenging proposition unless we can tie down a sufficient number of facts before we can take action effectively against them.
Any other questions on internal audit reports or activities I'll be happy to address?
Okay, thank you, Mark. Agenda item 5B is consideration of adopting an amended annual internal audit plan for fiscal year 2014. Mark, I think you're still up.
Thank you. Agenda item 5B is seeking your approval of the amended FY 2014 annual audit plan. We brought the plan to the committee in July of 2013, and that plan, as you might imagine, is based on the best information available at the time that we conduct the risk assessment and the audit planning process, which is essentially right now about a year ago. So each, February through April or May is the time when we go about developing the plan. And so we review a lot of information, and things happen oftentimes subsequent to plan development and approval, and sometimes those things are things that we want to bring back to the committee to consider amending the plan, as is the case in this particular situation. The plan amendment brought before you today removes one audit, which is information security review, to avoid duplication of effort, and it adds another activity, and that is our participation in the KPMG annual financial statement audit. Those two things were certainly things that came to our attention after the plan was developed and approved. What we learned in terms of information security is that the Gartner Consulting Group did a project in collaboration with the Texas Department of Information Resources, and they did a comprehensive information security assessment of our agency's program. The results of that, I believe, are still anticipated to be brought before the committee at some future meeting date, but certainly The work of the Gartner Group largely overlapped what we were planning on performing in terms of information security assessment, so we felt like the resources were better spent in other ways. And then the KPMG participation, if you will recall, at the July meeting, at that point in time, we still hadn't received the approval as to whether or not KPMG was going to, in fact, be performing the audit for the current or the previous fiscal year. And so now that that's been, we've received the approval, we want to add that into the plan because we feel like that's a beneficial collaboration with the audit firm and participating in with 50 hours worth of our internal audit effort. There's some other indirect factors, project transition issues with late August retirement of one of our staff members, and then I think something that's impacted a number of areas within the agency, and that is just the learning more about the negotiated rulemaking process and just the amount of time and effort that it takes to participate and to move through that process. I think that I have a newfound appreciation for the process, although I'm happy to report that for compliance monitoring it, we have consensus and we have a rule that will be brought before the board tomorrow. So those are some issues that have impacted our plan, and I would ask at this time for your approval of our amended audit plan.
Questions for Mark? Second. A motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Motion carries. Item 5C is a discussion item, discussion of the Texas State Auditor's Office final report, an audit report on performance measures at the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. Mark?
Thank you. The report that you have in your packet was issued on November the 4th by the Texas State Auditor's Office, and they looked at the agency's performance measures process and our key performance measures. This audit was an in-depth review. It's conducted at a number of agencies, and you can see from the results, 10 of the 11 key performance measures that the auditors reviewed, they were looking at fiscal year 2012 primarily. For 10 of 11, the results were considered reliable, and then 1 of the 11 was considered inaccurate by the auditors. Related to that, the auditors made 8 recommendations that were aimed at strengthening controls around the performance measurement process. And the final report includes the management response and the corrective action plans that are a part of those management responses. I guess if I were going to direct your attention, to a couple of the one issue and one theme, there was for the inaccurate measure that's discussed on page 9 of the report, and it related to several issues around the pass rate on state certification exams for Centers for Teaching Education at Texas Association of Developing College Institutions. And then I guess generally speaking, throughout the report for that issue as well as some of the other measures, there was a general theme that I think the auditors looked at performance measurement as a discrete process. And so as opposed to treating it as an incidental part of a person's job or job responsibilities or functions, the auditors were looking at, is there robust documentation of the entire process from the very beginning to the last step. And I guess included in that written documentation would be matters such as where the data sources are coming from, who is reviewing the information, verification practices that exist once the data is received, or even verification that might occur at the source of the data. So they really took a hard look at how we document the entire review of this information, and I think that those 8 recommendations reflect that hard look, and the corrective action plans are right there in your reports. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions? Harold?
So the the deficiency was really based on when the total number of the pass rate was taken on the part of the coordinating board. Then when the auditor's office went in, they found a different rate
That's correct.
because they looked at a different date.
I think there were some issues of timing, as well as there was actually a mathematical issue related to the average of averages, which I believe, I'm no mathematician, but I believe that's not an accepted practice. And so I think the combination of those two facts created a measurement that was quite a few percentage points off when they reran the numbers. Correct.
Yeah.
Harold?
On I guess it's little Roman numeral 3 in the performance measures on the state auditor's office report. The one that I guess where it says pass rate on state certification exams, where it says inaccurate, and then down below it says it's inaccurate because they self-report.
He's on this page.
So
I'm trying
this
to
page right, this one.
Sure, thank you.
But don't all the institutions self-report?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Judith Laredo, Assistant Commissioner for the division where this program is housed. The institutions, yes, do self-report. And what happened this year was, in this 1 year in question, is the way it was calculated. Instead of looking at the number of students in the program, the number of students who took the test, and then looking at the data submitted by the institution, the next step would have been to have gone to TEA, where the certification records are kept. And that's what happened. It didn't follow to the next step. And so we have since corrected that and gone back to, in the reporting of the institutions in this new contract that was issued, to determine that when we get their numbers, then we will go back and backtrack to the state where the official record is kept, because they have an accounting of every year of the number who took it, the number who passed it. And then that's what gives you the ultimate pass rate, whether or not they have met the performance standard that we have set for the institutions for this funding period.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify. I mean, all the institutions self-report.
They do. They do.
But from an audit standpoint, then we should have gone back to TEA? Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, we've put that in place now to ensure that we don't have the discrepancy that we had this time, because the data did not match.
So we hadn't had this problem in previous years?
No.
Okay.
This is the anomaly year that
Right.
occurred, and that happened to be the year that they audited.
Right. Okay. Dr.
I
Lamson?
would have been alarmed at that pass rate.
Well, yes, because it's below the state standard.
Ooh.
Any other questions or comments? Just a discussion item. No approval needed. Thank you. Okay, item 6, compliance. Agenda item 6A, the update on compliance monitoring reports and activities. Mark?
Thank you. 6A, we're going to update you on our compliance monitoring reports and activities. By design, I think we want to keep a separation between our reporting on internal audit activities and compliance monitoring reports and activities, although there's definitely some linkage there. We completed 2 projects during the reporting period, and both of those final reports are included in your materials. One was a formula funding review at South Texas College, and the other tuition equalization grant at Austin College. Both of those reports were no findings or recommendations. In terms of other activities, we're now fully staffed, and we're scheduling additional projects as we speak. We're in the early stages of working on the FY15 compliance monitoring plan that will be presented at the July AOC meeting. And we're also working as it pertains to the negotiated rulemaking process for compliance monitoring. One of the aspects, I guess, that was brought out of that process was the continuing need for us to develop additional compliance monitoring methodologies. So we really want to have more than one tool, in our toolkit to be able to conduct compliance monitoring. Right now, the tool, the one and only tool, really at this point, has been site visits, which we're conducting as performance audits. We want to have a level that's a level of scrutiny that is where we can cover more ground more quickly and maybe identify conditions of risk that could then serve to turn into a full-blown audit as needed. And so that new methodology is a desk review methodology. And since we're required to go through the negotiated rulemaking process, we got the rules approved for the methodology as it currently exists, with the understanding that as we pilot and develop this new desk review methodology, we'll have to reconvene the negotiated rulemaking committee at some point in the future and see if we can achieve consensus on this new methodology. But before we can do that, we have some homework to do internally to get it developed, get it piloted, see how it works, tweak it, and so forth. And so those efforts are getting underway. I have a briefing tomorrow that will cover, as part of the requested approval of the compliance monitoring rule that will be presented to the full board. We'll also give a compliance update just to share with the board kind of where we are at this particular point in time, and really the importance and the commitment that is being placed on the compliance monitoring function. I will be happy to answer any questions that you might have about compliance monitoring.
Any questions? Okay. Update. Agenda item 5B is an update on amended fiscal year 14 annual compliance monitoring plan. Art?
Thank you. This final item is informational only. It's our amended 14 annual compliance monitoring plan. You may be asking the question why the amendment to the internal audit plan was an approval item and the compliance monitoring plan is a informational only item. We took a look at really the compliance monitoring, the whole function has evolved or is continuing to evolve. So at the time the compliance monitoring plan was originally presented to the board, it did not report to me. It reported to Dr. Alonso. We've since that time transitioned, and it is reporting to me now, and it's following auditing standards, and I think there's more rigor and protocol that's being put in place. So going forward, the plan will be presented for your approval, and then any subsequent changes to that plan would be presented as an amendment for your approval. But we felt like with this for this first plan, that we would just present it as an informational item. The amendment that we're moving forward with, similar to the internal audit plan, we developed the compliance monitoring plan in the springtime based on the information that's available at that time, and then we adjust or modify the plan based on events that happen thereafter. So some of the significant factors that have caused a need to go in and make an adjustment to the plan, we moved into an environment of additional documentation requirements. Basically, when we moved the function from Dr. Alonso to myself, when we elected to follow government auditing standards in order to satisfy our stakeholders, that certainly created an additional administrative burden of documentation that we're that we're moving forward with. Another item that impacted the plan is just the amount of time. We were very deliberate. We wanted to make sure that we were very careful in our selection for the final 2 vacancies that we had. And so we essentially had, we got those staff on board in November, but there had been September and October time period when we had a couple of vacant positions. And then the last bullet or the last item there is the negotiated rulemaking process and the amount of time and involvement and effort that has gone towards making sure that we get that process right. So if you ask what's changed in the plan, you'll see in your materials there's a red line version of the amended plan. We reduced available hours, and so the cutbacks were really, we took those cutbacks very strategically. We go with the risk ranking approach, and so if we have to pull something off of the plan, we go with the projects that were the least risky that were on the plan. And so we removed 1 scheduled formula funding review and then 3 financial aid reviews. And just the footnote to the financial aid reviews, while that number may seem alarming to you, I would just state that the more financial aid reviews that we conduct, the better we get at starting to see patterns of whether or not our work is in areas that is producing, reportable conditions. And so, as of a couple of years ago, there was some concern, and we wanted to look, I guess, at tuition equalization grants at our private institutions. We had some experience with one institution where we had some issues, but I guess as a reaction to that, and since that time, for the TEG reviews that we've done at these private institutions, they seem to be coming back one after another with no reportable conditions. So we're thinking that particular event some time ago was an aberration, fortunately, and so now this modification is taking some of those TEG reviews off of the table, but we've left on the table, a bigger project that's related to Beyond Time at a private institution. So we're still getting some financial aid coverage, but we're just reducing in an area that seems to no longer be problematic. So with that, I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Harold?
It looks like to me that 1,500 hours net has pretty much been what's reduced.
That is correct.
Okay.
Well, it's
no, it's not that. It's half that, 750 or whatever.
From 1,500 to 850, correct.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No.
Board members, any other questions?
4.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This concludes the Agency Operations Committee meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor say aye. Meeting adjourned.